My name is Andrea Stanton. I am 34. And last Christmas, my mother-in-law slapped me across the face in front of 18 relatives. It wasn't because of the argument with my sister-in-law. It was because of the one true sentence I said during it. She called me trailer trash. She told me to take my daughter and get out. So, I did. No scene, no shouting, just a 7-year-old's coat buttoned in the hallway and 2 bags in the trunk. And what I did the next morning, quietly from my phone before my coffee got cold, is the reason she was the one crying by 9 a.m. But here's what none of them knew yet. I had been carrying that whole family for 4 years, and I was about to set them down. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This channel is where quiet women finally get loud. Stories about family, betrayal, and the moment somebody decides that enough is enough. If you have ever kept the peace at your own expense, this story is going to feel familiar. Drop a comment below, and be sure to subscribe, because the ending of this one is worth staying for. The story of that slap starts with 2 houses. The first is mine, a 3-bedroom ranch on Alder Street that my husband Mark and I bought 9 years ago, with a porch light that flickers and a kitchen table we found at an estate sale. I'm an ICU nurse, 12 years on nights and weekends. 12 years of holding strangers' hands at 2 in the morning. Mark is a quality engineer, steady and kind and allergic to conflict in a way I didn't fully understand until it mattered. The second house is his mother's, a white colonial on Beerwood Lane, 20 minutes away, with hedges cut like they are afraid of her, and a china cabinet that gets dusted more often than some children get hugged. Sylvia Stanton has a phrase she deploys the way other people use punctuation. In this family, in thank you notes. In this family, I learned over 9 years of marriage, there was a seat for me at the table, but it was never quite mine. I was useful. Useful is different. I worked the holidays nobody wanted so I could afford to be generous. I remembered every birthday, when my father-in-law passed 4 years ago. I was the one who sat with Sylvia through the funeral arrangements while her own daughter was too devastated to choose a casket, but not too devastated to post about it. None of that ever moved my chair 1 inch closer to the family. There was a number attached to my seat at that table. An exact number with a $sign. And I'll get to it because it's the reason this story ends the way it does. But first, you need to know where I come from because Sylvia never let me forget it. I grew up in Cedar Row Mobile Home Park, Lot 12, in a single wide with a stripe of rust under every window. My mother cleaned houses for a living. Nice houses, colonial houses, houses with china cabinets, and she raised me alone on coffee and stubbornness. I did homework at a fold-down table. I learned to stretch a pound of ground beef across 3 dinners. At 17, I started as a nursing aide at the county hospital, and I paid my way through nursing school in shifts and scholarships. And the day I pinned on my iron badge, my mother cried into a dish towel because we didn't own handkerchiefs. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it's the part of me that Sylvia found first. Mark brought me to Beerwood Lane for the 3rd date, an ambush of a dinner party. And I watched his mother do the math on me in real time. My shoes, my coat, my zip code. She was gracious the whole evening, which is worse than rude because you can't object to it. On the porch, she took both my hands and said warmly in front of everyone, "What an inspiring story you are, Andrea." A story, not a person. An inspiring story, the kind you tell to prove the system works. 9 years later, she had never once introduced me to anyone without working in where I came from. Sometimes it was dressed up as a compliment. It was never a compliment. It was a price tag she kept taped to my sleeve so nobody would mistake me for full retail. The strange thing is I accepted it. Where I grew up, you learn early that belonging costs money. And I had been raised by a woman who paid that bill her whole life. I just didn't know yet how literal the bill was going to get. Christmas at Sylvia's was not a holiday. It was a production staged annually, with a cast of 18, and a director, who never once appeared to be directing. The Leogina came down from the cabinet. Service for 24, hand-washed only, older than the marriage that bought it. The menu was approved by Sylvia in November. The seating chart was never written down and never violated. Sylvia at the head, Brooke at her right hand, Mark at her left, and me. 9 years running at the far end, between whichever cousins had children young enough to spill things. My daughter Lily, who was 7 that year, got a lecture in the car every Christmas Eve from nobody because I refused to give it, and got it anyway the moment we walked in. Sit up straight, sweetheart. In this family, we don't put elbows on the table. We stayed overnight every year, all of us, because Sylvia liked the photograph of grandchildren on the staircase in matching pajamas. Liked the photograph, mind you, the way a set designer likes a prop. And every year I packed our 2 duffel bags and smiled and told myself it was one night, that traditions matter, that Lily should know her grandmother. That's the sentence I want you to hold on to. Keeping the peace always sounds like love when you say it fast enough. That year, the production had a surprise in the second act. Brooke arrived 40 minutes late, glowing like a woman with an announcement, hugging everyone a beat too long. Big news, she kept saying, tapping her wine glass with one acrylic nail. Wait for dinner. Big news. In this family, we don't make scenes. Sylvia said it that very afternoon to a 7-year-old over a dropped fork. By 8 o'clock that night, the only person in 18 years to make a genuine scene at that table would be Sylvia herself. Before I tell you about dinner, you need 2 sentences from 2 different women, because my whole life happened between them. The first was my mother's. I was 9 at the fold-down table, and I'd asked why she wore her good blouse to clean the Albrights' house. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "We don't get a seat, Andy. We rent one." Then she went to work. She rented her seat in every room she ever entered, with extra shifts, with perfect manners, with never once asking for anything. And she died at 56, still current on the rent. And I don't think a single one of those rooms noticed she was gone. The second sentence came from Sylvia, on my wedding day in the bridal room, while she fixed a pin in my hair that did not need fixing. "None of this Mrs. Stanton business," she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "You'll call me Mom. In this family, we don't do formalities." And I did. For 9 years, I called that woman Mom. I brought her soup when she had her knees done. I called her on Sunday evenings when Mark forgot. Some part of me, the 9-year-old at the fold-down table, believed that if I was useful enough, warm enough, cheap enough to keep, and expensive enough to lose, the title would eventually come true the way a rental sometimes turns into a home. I want to be honest with you because this story doesn't work if I'm not. Nobody forced me into that arrangement. I volunteered. Overfunctioning was the only language of love I'd ever been taught, and I was fluent. It took a slap across the face in front of my daughter to teach me the difference between being wanted at a table and being load-bearing. Dinner started at 6. The big news landed with the roast. Brooke stood, glass raised, and announced that she was opening her 3rd boutique. 3rd, because the first 2 had each lasted about as long as a gym membership, this time in the good part of Maple Glen. This time for real. And then she turned to the head of the table, glass tilted, and said the sentence that started everything. "And it's all thanks to Mom, who believed in me to the tune of $15,000. Applause. Actual applause from the cousins. And I sat at the far end of that table, and did what 12 years of night shifts have trained me to do, which is math under pressure. $15,000 from a 62-year-old widow on a pension who, as far as the family knew, was comfortably set, but whose actual monthly mortgage had been quietly ought to paying out of my checking account for 4 years, $940 a month, every month since the winter my father-in-law died, plus $260 a month for Brooke's car insurance, because there was a crisis once in the way that Brooke's life was a subscription service of crisis, and temporary had turned into 48 months. I hadn't told the cousins. I hadn't told anyone. That was the deal I'd made with my own pride. You don't get to resent what you volunteer for. So I sat there while the family toasted Sylvia's generosity, funded at $1,200 a month by the trailer trash, at the end of the table, and I might have swallowed it. I had 9 years of practice swallowing, except that Brooke, flushed with wine and victory, looked down the table at me and smiled and said, "Some people just talk about supporting family. Some of us are grateful enough to actually show up." She knew that was the thing. She knew exactly whose money it was. I didn't yell. I want the record straight on that because 18 people rewrote this scene within a week. I set down my fork and into the after-toast quiet I said calmly one true sentence. "Brooke, before we toast Mom's generosity, you should probably know the boutique money and your car insurance come from the same account my mortgage help comes from. Mine and Mark's. It's been our money for 4 years. I've never minded. But if we are doing gratitude tonight, let's at least address the envelope correctly." Silence has a temperature. That one dropped below freezing. Brooke's glass stopped halfway down. Mark, beside his mother, went very still and looked at his plate. I watched him choose the plate. That's the sentence I'd repeat in counseling months later. He chose the plate. And Sylvia rose from the head of the table with the unhurried certainty of a woman who has never once been contradicted in her own dining room. She walked the length of that table, past the Legay, past her grandchildren, and she slapped me across the face hard enough to turn my head in front of my daughter. "You'll always be trailer trash," she said, each word pressed flat, and even like a woman ironing. "Take your daughter and get out of my house." 18 people and the only sound was the furnace. Lily's fork was still in her hand. I looked at my husband, one last full second of an offer, and he looked at his plate. So, I stood up. I thanked no one. I took my daughter's hand, buttoned her coat in the hallway under the staircase photos of matching pajamas, brought down our 2 duffel bags, and walked out the front door of the house I had been paying for without one word of argument. I didn't argue. I packed our bags. The drive home to Alder Street was 20 minutes, and Lily fell asleep before the second stoplight, and my hand stayed steady on the wheel because I was doing math again. My phone rang at 8:51 the next morning. The title of this story says, "Mom called me crying and I need you to understand who that is." Not my mother. My mother has been gone 6 years. Mom is what I called Sylvia Stanton, at her own instruction, for 9 years. The woman who told me we don't do formalities in this family was calling me at 8:51 the morning after she slapped me and put me out of her house like a stray. And she was crying. Real tears. I know the sound of real tears. I hear them for a living. For about 4 seconds, standing at my kitchen counter with my coffee going cold. My stupid loyal heart leapt at that sound. She's calling to apologize. 9 years of rent and I still believed the lease might convert. Then she spoke. "Andrea, what you did last night. You've torn this family apart at Christmas. Do you understand that? Christmas." Brooke cried all night. The cousins keep calling me. My Christmas is in ruins. I said nothing. The crying gathered itself. And then wet and casual like a hand slipping into a pocket came the actual reason for the call. "And listen, the mortgage draft comes out on the 3. With all this upset, I need to know that's not going to be affected. Tell me you're not going to be childish about the house." There it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "Are you all right?" Not "Is Lily all right?" The 7-year-old who watched her grandmother strike her mother. The draft comes out on the 3rd. I stood in my kitchen and felt something in my chest go perfectly, surgically quiet. The same quiet I get when a monitor alarms and the room starts to panic, and my hands already know the protocol. "I'll text you," I said, and hung up and looked at my coffee and it was still warm. That's how fast a heart can finish changing. It had taken 9 years and one phone call, and the coffee was still warm. Let me give you the anatomy of the number, because every family has one and nobody says it out loud. When my father-in-law died 4 years ago, it came out quietly in lawyer's office lighting. That the Colonial on Beerwood Lane still carried a mortgage, and that his pension died with him mostly. Sylvia had a widow's benefit and her pride. Mark sat at our estate sale kitchen table doing sums with a pencil grey in the face, and I watched my husband drowning, and did what I do. I said we can cover the house note for a few months until she gets sorted. $940 a month temporary. Then Brooke had her crisis of the season. A total lease elapsed policy, and $260 a month of car insurance joined the ticket, also temporary. Nobody ever decided it would become permanent. That's how these things work. Gratitude has a short memory and invoices don't. Autopay is a miracle of mercy for everyone except the person funding it. The third of the month came. The money left. No one had to feel anything. 4 years, $1,200 a month, $57,600, while I patched my scrubs and Sylvia bought service pieces for the loge. And before you ask why I never renegotiated, I tried. 3 separate times. I asked to sit down and talk about the arrangement like adults, and I never got past the opening sentence. The first time, Sylvia developed a headache that required the room. The second, it was 3 weeks to Christmas, and in this family, we don't discuss money at the holidays. The third time, Brooke called mid-con conversation with a crisis, and the meeting simply never reformed. You cannot schedule a conversation with people whose way of life depends on the conversation never happening. I understand that now. Back then, I just kept paying rent on a seat at a table where, as it turned out, the landlady was planning my eviction for free. Here is everything I did the morning after Christmas in full. Because the family version of this story has me scheming like a villain in a soap opera. I finished my coffee. I opened my banking app at the kitchen table while Lily watched cartoons in her pajamas. I went to scheduled payments and I can-led 2 of them, the $940 and the $260, which took 4 taps and about 90 seconds, less time than Sylvia had spent walking the length of her table to slap me. Then I wrote 1 text message and I revised it twice, not to sharpen it, but to file the edges off. And I sent it to Sylvia and copied Brooke, because I don't do things behind backs. After last night, the financial support ends. The December payments were the last ones. This isn't punishment, and it isn't a negotiation. It's just over. I wish you both well. Please don't call about this. I did not post anything. I did not text a single cousin. I did not tell my side to one human being except my husband. When he came downstairs 10 minutes later, hair flattened, holding his phone like it was ticking because his mother had already called him before 9 a.m. to report what I had done. Notice the order of operations there. It matters later. And the first reply I personally received wasn't from Sylvia at all. It was 3 question marks, then a paragraph. And I'll spare you the paragraph. But the closing line I remember word for word, because people always tell you exactly what they are most afraid of dressed up as a prophecy about you. You just made the biggest mistake of your marriage. Not of my life, mind you, of my marriage. Even in a panic about her car insurance, Brooke knew precisely where the pressure point was and precisely who could be counted on to stand on it. She was aiming at Mark before I'd rinsed my coffee cup. Mark and I had it out that night after Lily was asleep in the kitchen in the fierce whispers of parents who've never learned to fight at normal volume. I'll give my husband this much. He never once defended the slap. He'd been horrified. He'd texted his mother that morning that what she did was unforgivable. And I believe he meant the word, as much as a man can mean a word he has never once acted on. But about the money, he stood in front of the refrigerator and said, "I just don't think we should weaponize it. That's her house, Andy. She's 62. And I heard myself answer in a voice I didn't recognize. Low and level. The voice underneath 9 years of pleasant. "I'm not weaponizing anything. A weapon is something you swing at someone. I'm just putting down something I was never supposed to carry alone. There's a difference between attacking a person and no longer subsidizing her." He said she would lose the house. I said that was possible and that it would not be my doing. The house had been losing itself for 4 years, and I had been the sandbag, and you cannot call it a flood the moment the sandbag stands up and walks away. He said she's my mother. And I said the thing I'd been circling for 9 years and never once landed on. I know. And I've been her second income and her favorite insult. Both at the same time since Lily was 3. You watched it happen at that table your whole life. And last night you looked at your plate. He flinched like I'd raised a hand to him. He slept in the den. I lay awake in our bed doing what I do at 3 a.m. in the ICU, which is watch the numbers and refuse to panic. And somewhere before dawn, I understood that the slap had only ended my arrangement with Sylvia. My arrangement with Mark, the one where I carried things so he'd never have to choose. That one was just now coming up for review. In January, a strange little door opened, and I want to show it to you now because everything at the end walks through it. Mark had brought home boxes from Bearwood Lane months before. His father's things, the estate stuff nobody fights over, fishing licenses, cuff links, a shoebox of photographs. It fell to me to sort them. Obviously, useful is useful, even in exile. And in the shoebox between a picture of a fishing trip and somebody's christening, I found a black and white photograph of a laundromat. Suds and Suck, the sign said, hand-painted. Out front, a teenage girl in an apron, arms crossed, chin up, looking at the camera. The way you look at something you've decided to survive. It took me a full 10 seconds, and then it took my breath. The jawline, the eyes. Sylvia, I turned it over. Nothing but a year, 4 decades and change ago, in pencil. When I showed Mark, he did something I'd never seen in 9 years of marriage. He glanced at the kitchen doorway first in his own house before he answered, like her hearing reached across town. Grandma and Grandpa Kowalski ran a laundromat, he said quietly. Mom worked there through school. She doesn't talk about it. Dad kept that picture. She hated that he kept it. I stood at my estate sale table holding the photograph of a girl in an apron with my mother-in-law's face. A girl who folded strangers' sheets after school, and I felt the floor of 9 years tilt a few degrees. You'll always be trailer trash, said flat and even, like a woman ironing. I had assumed the cruelty came from above, from a woman born on the hill, sneering down. It hadn't. It had come from somewhere much closer to Lot 12 than to Bearwood Lane, and that made it stranger and worse. And though I didn't have the word for it yet, sadder. I put the photograph in my dresser drawer under the sweaters. Don't worry, it stays there. This isn't that kind of story. On the first warm Sunday in February, I did something I hadn't done since nursing school. I drove my daughter to Cedar Row. It's still there off Route 12 behind the tractor dealership, smaller than my memory of it, the way everything true is. And I parked across from Lot 12 where a different single wide sits now, tan instead of white, with a pinwheel garden and somebody's bike on its side in the grass. Lily looked out the window, then at me, waiting. This is where I grew up, I said. Lot 12 right there. My bedroom window was on that end. And I told her, not a sermon, just facts, the way you'd want them told to you. About the fold-down table where I did my homework. About my mother leaving before dawn in her good blouse to clean other people's houses. And what she used to say, "We don't get a seat, we rent one." About how I'd believed her my whole life, and how I had rented and rented and rented. Lily listened the way 7-year-olds do with her whole face. Then she asked the question that children ask because nobody has taught them not to yet. If you lived in a trailer, why does Grandma Sylvia hate trailers? And I looked at the pinwheel spinning on somebody's rented lot. And I thought about a girl in an apron in front of a laundromat. And I gave my daughter the truest answer I had because some people run away from a place their whole lives, baby. And anyone who reminds them of it feels like the road back. We sat a while. Then I said the sentence I had driven 20 to say out loud with a witness. So it would count. "We are done renting seats, Lily. Both of us from anybody." She nodded solemn as a judge and asked if we could get milkshakes. We got milkshakes. If you want to know the exact center of this story, it isn't a bank app or a slap. It's a parked car across from lot 12. While I was buying milkshakes, Brooke was working. I have to hand it to my sister-in-law. She has never held a job for 2 consecutive years, but the woman could run a public relations firm. The family group chat, the big one, both sides, 40-odd people, got a version of Christmas in which I had ambushed a grieving widow at her own table with wild accusations about money, and been asked to leave and retaliated by trying to put her on the street. The slap did not appear in this version. My name did, attached to the phrase after everything that was done for her. Then came the satellite campaigns. The church circle heard Sylvia might lose the house because of the daughter-in-law. The school pickup line heard we'd had a falling out, said with the eyebrows that do the real talking. An aunt of Mark's I had hosted for 8 Thanksgivings called me to say more in sorrow than in anger that family forgives Andrea, and that pride was a sin that punished the proud. I listened, thanked her for calling, and did not explain. That was the policy I'd set for myself at the kitchen table in December. And it cost me more than the money ever had. No rebuttals, no receipts posted to the group chat, no campaign of my own. If someone asked me directly face to face, they got one sentence. "Sylvia hit me in front of my daughter, and I stopped paying her bills." Those are both true and I'm at peace with both. And nothing else, no matter how the silence begged. Some people believed me, more didn't, or found it easier not to. I lost the church circle. I lost 2 school mom friendships I'd thought were real. On the nights it stung, I'd stand in Lily's doorway and watch her sleep and do the only math that still mattered. One witness, 7 years old, learning what her mother does when the whole room decides the truth is inconvenient. Let the group chat have the rest. If you have ever been somebody's invisible autopay, the reliable one, the one who covers and smooths and pays and gets remembered exactly once a year, in a toast that spends your money under someone else's name. Stay with me because the next part is for you. And if you believe a woman can love her family and still close her wallet, subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, March, the part Brooke's version of events had no chapter 4, the truth about the house started coming up through the floorboards. A bank letter forwarded to Mark by a panicked Sylvia revealed that the mortgage on Beerwood Lane had been 60 days delinquent twice before Christmas, before the slap, while my autopay was still running. The math didn't work until it did. My 940 had never gone to the bank at all. It went to Sylvia's account, where the note plus the taxes, plus the Loge lifestyle plus withdrawals no widow's benefit, could sustain the boutique money among them had twice spent it before the bank got its share. My money hadn't been holding up the house. It had been holding up the performance of the house, and the performance was over budget for years. Meanwhile, Brooke, $400 behind on a lease she couldn't cover without my $260, turned in her white SUV, and posted something about simplifying her life. I felt no triumph reading any of it. I want that understood. This is the part the revenge story version gets wrong. Watching a 62-year-old woman's finances come apart is not satisfying. Even when she slapped you, even when every collapsing number is a number you predicted, what I felt was the cold, clean confirmation a nurse feels when the scan proves what she palpated months ago. I hadn't caused this. I had been concealing it. Mark read the bank letter 3 times at our kitchen table and said to the table, "It was always this bad." She never said a word. The months that followed were quiet the way a braced house is quiet. Spring, summer, a fall of union.